Hello, one and all. Welcome to another episode of MMA Vision Analysis. This one, I'm here to talk about Mathews, Gamrot, Dan Hooker, the fight that's going to happen in the lightweight division, and Alexander Volkanovski's comments and thoughts on this fight in particular. But before getting started, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and click that notification to get all it is that is new from this channel, your channel, the one and only MMA Vision Analysis. Despite the blemishes in Dan Hooker's recent record, or his record as of late, a few blemishes here and there, still I look at Dan Hooker as one of the best strikers that's come out of that region. If I'm not mistaken, Dan Hooker is the teammate of Israel Adesanya. A matter of fact, I think they sparred together, obviously being teammates. And in terms of striking, Dan Hooker is really one of the best strikers in that lightweight division. But we all know at this point we have the presence of obviously Islam Makhachev, which is arguably the best wrestler in that division, probably in the UFC. I do understand that some people might bring up Dan Hooker's next opponent, Mathews Gamrot. Obviously a great wrestler of his own, but it's a different kind of wrestling than what the Dagestanis bring to the table. The Dagestani style of wrestling, it's just very, very different. On the other hand, Mathews Gamrot, his style of wrestling is consistent. Yes, he will attempt time and time again to take Dan Hooker down. But it seems like Alexander Volkanovski believes in Dan Hooker's takedown defense, and he believes in his striking even more. And he thinks that that Dan Hooker will be able to stop those takedowns, number one. Number two, he thinks that in terms of striking, Mathews Gamrot is not going to have much to answer for in terms of striking, which is very interesting. Personally, I do understand Dan Hooker has had some a few losses here and there. It does not put Dan Hooker completely out of the title race, I believe. It literally, any one of those guys, 2-3 fights, you can see him challenging for a title. But when we talk about the very top of that division, and it's just the UFC in general right now, I don't want to say the wrestling heavy styles are dominating, but certainly in the divisions that are championed by wrestling heavy fighters, those divisions are certainly being dominated, like the lightweight division, the division that we're talking about here. I do understand that Dan Hooker has fantastic striking, and it seems like that Volkanovski thinks that he has great takedown defense as well. But it's something about the wrestlers. I'm not saying that Mathews Gamrot has the same style of wrestling as Islam Makhachev. That's definitely not the case. Very different. That being said, your promise that Mathews Gamrot is going to be just as relentless as Islam Makhachev to shoot for takedowns. So, yes, if you are Dan Hooker, you might be able to stuff takedowns, 3, 4, 5 takedowns. But imagine having to do that the entirety of the fight. It just sounds exhausting. You see what I mean? It just sounds exhausting. And in all honesty, as soon as a guy that's predominantly a wrestler takes you down, they can just basically sit on top of you for the rest of the round, and they would win rounds that way. So in terms of takedown defense, yes, I believe in what Volkanovski's saying in behalf of Dan Hooker, or on behalf of Dan Hooker. But at the same time, we have to realize that for strikers dealing with wrestlers, especially wrestlers that are as relentless as a Dan Hooker, then I think that as Mathews Gamrot, then I think Dan Hooker is truly in for a difficult time. I do understand that Volkanovski's probably seen something that we can't necessarily see, being outsiders. If I'm not mistaken, Dan Hooker is the teammate of Alexander Volkanovski. But at the same time, I think Gamrot is one of those powerhouse names that's gonna prove himself to be one of the biggest names in that lightweight division within the next, let's say, 3-4 fights. In all honesty, the champion of the division kind of lacks competition at this point, aside from Arman Tsarukyan, who is facing a 9-month ban allegedly. I'm not sure what's going on with Tsarukyan, but that was the next fight for Islam Makhachev. But obviously Islam's dealing with an injury himself, and with a 9-month ban for Tsarukyan, I don't imagine that Islam Makhachev is going to be without an opponent for 9 months. So what I'm trying to say here is that if Gamrot gets a win over Dan Hooker, and I would say one or two more guys after that, then he will see himself challenging for that title come 2025. It's all speculation. I have all respect for Volkanovski's comments, but I have great belief in Mathews Gamrot. This is not me siding over one side over the other. That's not the case at all. All I'm saying is that the wrestlers of the UFC are just, especially let's say in the lightweight division as of late, the wrestlers have definitely been dominating that division. You just go back as far as Khabib, and now championed by Islam Makhachev. There was nobody in between. Even when Charles Oliveira was the holder of that title, he's technically a grappler. He definitely is a jiu-jitsu expert. So this division has been overpowered by wrestlers / grapplers for the best part of the last 5-6 years. You have to do is go back and see who's championed the division for the past 5 or 6 years. That statement will make itself clearly evident. If you made it this far, I appreciate you for sticking around. Please let me know what you think in the comments, and subscribe for more.